What if the greatest mage who ever lived died alone, and 20 years later woke up in the body of a nobody? Stick around, because by the end of this recap you'll watch that nobody make an entire empire regret underestimating him. Our story starts in blood and fire, in the final hours of a war that nearly wiped out humanity. A man lies dying with a sword through his chest, surrounded by the bodies of everyone he loved. He was a ninth circle mage, a living legend, the kind of man wars are named after. His name was Oscar, and in his final moments he wasn't thinking about glory. He was crawling toward the enemy's corpse, desperate to confirm the demon high priest was actually dead. That demon had united every monster on the continent and dragged humanity to the edge of extinction. Not even children were spared from that war, and Oscar had spent his whole life trying to change that. In fact, right before the end he used his last breath to save one child from being devoured. A dragon named Edna appeared at the scene, the last of her kind and a witness to all of history. She had good news and bad news for the dying master of the White Tower. The bad news, most of his mages were dead and their research had burned with them. The good news, the Imperial Army had arrived to save his disciples. Oscar didn't regret sending his best fighters into that fire, but he did have one regret. He said if he ever got another chance at life, he wouldn't waste it being noble. He'd live selfishly, just for the people he actually cared about. And then he died, and Edna recorded the time of death for the great sage Oscar. 20 years pass, and we're back at the White Tower, where a boy is waking up from what feels like a very long sleep. He wakes up so violently he actually punches the nurse changing his bedsheets. The first thing he does is check his own chest, because he's absolutely certain he should have a sword wound there. No scar, no wound, nothing but confusion. A door gets kicked open, and a furious blonde mage storms in, ready to lecture this kid for his behavior. But our boy isn't listening, because he thinks he's under attack, and he throws up a windshield strong enough to shatter bone. The shield holds for exactly 1 second before it starts falling apart, and that's when it hits him. Whatever body he's in right now, its magic is pathetic. The blonde mage, whose name is Maxim, actually stops being angry and starts being impressed, because that shield structure wasn't bad at all. A boy named Frank is standing there watching all this, silently deciding that this kid is completely insane. Our protagonist demands to know what day it is, and Frank tells him September 21st. He assumes he's been out for 5 months. Frank corrects him one day. He's been asleep for exactly 1 day. Our protagonist asks for 2 people by name, Lloyd and Gilly, wanting answers. Frank tells him to forget about traitors, and warns him not to say the Tower Master's name so casually. Apparently Lloyd abandoned the tower years ago, and Gilly got caught stealing scrolls. Our protagonist gets furious, insisting that's a lie, and Frank realizes he's telling the truth, because he's not lying either. The current Tower Master is a woman named Sasha. To our boy, Sasha is a 5-year-old child he used to teach. He's just been told he's over 25 years old. Slowly, painfully, he drags himself to a mirror and looks at his own reflection. He doesn't recognize the face staring back at him. 20 years have passed since he died, and the whole world moved on without him. The city outside has streetlights now, powered by something called magical engineering. His friends, his students, everyone he knew is gone, dead, or changed beyond recognition. But there's no time to grieve, because he's got a body to figure out, and this body has problems. It's To's bankrupt noble family's son, taken in by the tower at age 10 and stuck at level 1. For his age, that's humiliating, and apparently he felt that pressure so hard he bought an illegal elixir off the street. The elixir was supposed to boost his mana instantly. Instead, it put him in a coma. When our protagonist scans his own body with magic, he finds something that shouldn't be possible. This kid has way more raw mana than a level 1 mage could ever hold. And then he sees it, a dark viscous drop forming at his fingertip. Poison, actual poison still sitting in his bloodstream. The elixir wasn't an accident, it was cover. Somebody poisoned this boy and staged it to look like a bad drug deal gone wrong. And just like that, our protagonist has a mission in his second life. Find out who wanted this kid dead and make them pay for it. Across the city, a gang boss is getting bad news of his own. Someone tore his shop apart from the inside, and it looks like the mage who bought that poisoned elixir survived. The boss isn't worried about the White Tower investigating, because his client is somebody important. Somebody wearing a White Tower ring. That's when a voice cuts through the room, calmly pointing out how loud they're all being. Our protagonist has arrived, tracking the poison straight to its source. One of the thugs charges him with a sword, and our boy doesn't even flinch. One flick of the wrist, one gust of wind, and the man's head is rolling across the floor. The gang boss panics and empties a gun into him, and here's the twist. Our boy has never seen a gun before in his life. He doesn't even need to think about it. His shield stops every bullet cold. Since there's no mana in the bullets, he's just curious how the thing even works. So he sends every single bullet right back at the man who fired them. Now the boss is on the ground, bleeding, and our protagonist wants answers. The man refuses to talk, so our boy gives him a taste of exactly how creative wind magic can get. Within seconds the boss is sobbing and spilling everything he knows. The client wore a hood but he had one detail. Refreshing, almost minty. That detail seems small right now, but trust me, it's going to matter a lot later. Our boy leaves the man to bleed out, because after reading his rap sheet, he decides some people just don't deserve saving. Back at the tower, exhausted from casting basic skills, our protagonist realizes just how weak this body really is. The magic that once made him a legend barely holds together in his hands now. So he starts digging through the old Oscar's belongings, looking for clues about who this kid really was. He finds a book full of the boy's private notes on wind magic, theories way beyond what a normal student should know. This kid wasn't lazy, this kid was a genius who never got the chance to prove it. And that's when our protagonist decides something important. He's going to finish what this boy started and destroy whoever cut his wings. That night he dreams, and it's not a normal dream. It's a memory forced on him by a curse tied to his very soul, one that followed him into his second life. He sees himself teaching 3 children, Lloyd, Sasha, and a boy named Gileath, about the 4 schools of magic. He wakes to a broadcast calling him to a lab, and by the time he leaves, he's unlocked 12 new circuits and hit level 2. Inside the lab, he reconnects with Maxim, who used to follow him around calling him master. Maxim asks about the dead bandits, and our boy plays dumb, but hands over the evidence anyway. It's ruled self-defense, no questions asked. Then our protagonist asks for something he wants badly. A meeting with the tower master, Sasha. Bad news. She's away on business next 6 months. Worse news, the White Tower he remembers as one of the greatest institutions on the continent is now basically bankrupt. And that's when an old gardener recognizes him, calls him young master, and tells him he's leaving the tower for good. The reason breaks our protagonist's heart. The tower can't even afford the loyalty bonus this old man earned after 40 years of service. Our boy clenches his fists so hard he draws blood, right there in the hallway. He promises the old man he won't have to leave, because he's about to fix all of this. But how do you save a bankrupt magic tower when you're a broke level 2 mage? The answer walks right into his hands in the form of a newspaper article. A province under quarantine, a deadly epidemic called the Caldina fever, and a vaccine recipe the White Tower lost 20 years ago. Our protagonist has a plan, and it's audacious, reckless, and exactly the kind of move that made him a legend the first time around. He's going to recreate that lost vaccine, and he's going to sell it before anyone else can. The tower's finance officer thinks he's delusional, mocking him in front of everyone. But one old elder decides to gamble his own personal savings on this stubborn kid. And with that, our protagonist marches into the potion room to start cooking up his comeback. The first batch he brews isn't even the vaccine, it's just an energy drink. But it's enough to prove his hands haven't lost their touch. A troublemaker named Frank stumbles into the workshop looking for a favor, and our boy sees an opportunity. He teaches Frank a forbidden technique on the spot, casting 2 spells at once, something Frank shouldn't be able to do for years. Frank pulls it off on his very first try, completely stunned by what just happened to his own hands. With Frank's help, they crank out over 500 vials in a single day. But then comes terrible news. The Blue Tower is already in a meeting with the Archbishop, who controls the quarantined region. If they sign that contract first, everything our boy just built collapses before it even starts. So our protagonist does the one thing nobody expects. He flies straight to the meeting himself. He walks into the Archbishop's office and introduces himself as a mage from the White Tower, with an offer nobody can refuse. The Blue Tower's representative laughs in his face, calling him a liar with no money and no technology. Our boy doesn't argue, he just hands the Archbishop a working sample. The room goes dead silent. The jealous Blue Tower mage tries one more insult, mocking the White Tower's fall from glory. And that's a mistake. A dark, dangerous aura leaks out of our protagonist. And for 1 second, everyone in that room remembers exactly why the White Tower used to be feared. Before things can escalate, a call comes in from a city called Vince, thanking the Archbishop for vaccines that already arrived. Vaccines the White Tower secretly shipped ahead of time. The Blue Tower mage tries to claim regulations were broken, and our boy shuts him down with pure legal precision. This disease counts as a level B disaster, which means no red tape, no delays, no competition. The Blue Tower is escorted out in humiliation, and our protagonist casually mentions one more thing before they leave. He's already patented the formula. If they want to make it too, they'll be paying him royalties. Now it's just business. The Archbishop offers 2 million coins, matching the Blue Tower's bid. Our boy counters with 5 million, without blinking. Hours later, a check for 10 million coins lands in the White Tower's hands, and the entire building loses its mind. The woman who once called him delusional is now speechless, staring at more money than the tower has seen in decades. But money means nothing without workers, so our protagonist calls a meeting and gets completely ignored by every senior mage in the room. He solves that problem the loud way, blasting a sound spell that makes everyone's ears ring, and until they finally shut up and listen. Some of them still refuse to help him, because apparently the old Oscar had a reputation as an arrogant drunk. So our protagonist does something nobody expects. He reads off every single sacrifice these mages made to stay loyal to a sinking tower. Offers from rival towers they turned down, money they walked away from, years they gave up for nothing but loyalty. The room goes quiet and one by one, everyone in that hall puts on their gloves. A week later, they've made 140% more vaccine than promised, and the epidemic is officially over. The Archbishop's reputation skyrockets, orders keep pouring in, and for the first time in 20 years, the White Tower is actually turning a profit. But our protagonist isn't done, not even close. He notices 2 of his former students working as delivery mages, flying packages door to door, and an idea starts forming. If mages are already flying to every house in the city, why not sell something at the same time? He develops a health tonic aimed at the elderly, has delivery mages push it door to door, and even leaks a rumor that it improves a certain kind of stamina. Within a month they've sold 10 million vials. Meanwhile, the Blue Tower panics and slashes their prices by 50%, trying to crush the competition. It backfires spectacularly. Public opinion sides completely with the underdog White Tower, and the Blue Tower eats the loss instead. For the first time in his second life, our protagonist can breathe, but peace never lasts long in this world. Word reaches him that Frank, his loyal apprentice, is about to be dragged out of the tower by his own family. Frank is the youngest son of a powerful merchant family, and they've arranged a marriage that will end his career as a mage forever. Our protagonist finds Frank packing his bags, heartbroken, convinced he was never talented enough to matter anyway. But our boy tells him the truth. Frank has real talent, real potential, and giving up now would be a waste. Frank's older brother storms in, giving them exactly 5 minutes before he's dragged away for good. So our protagonist does the unthinkable. He negotiates, right there on the spot, for his friend's entire future. The brother laughs at the idea of a kid making business deals, until he learns this kid invented the vaccine everyone's been raving about. He sets a condition, a duel. Their family's level 5 knight against whatever mage our protagonist can produce tomorrow at noon. Frank panics, assuming our boy plans to somehow reach level 4 in a single night, which is impossible even for a genius. But that was never the plan. The one stepping into that arena isn't Oscar, it's Frank. All night, our protagonist trains him, fixing years of wasted mana circulation and teaching him control most archmages never even bother to master. Then he does something even bigger. He summons a wind spirit, something no human has managed in 27 years, just to help Frank control his power. The next day the duel begins and Frank is visibly terrified, facing down a level 5 knight. But slowly, memory by memory, he remembers everything he was taught the night before. He lands hit after hit, shocking everyone watching, including his own brother, who can't understand how his little brother improved this much overnight. Just when the night is about to end it, Frank pulls out the technique he'd been too traumatized to ever use again. He turns part of his own body into pure wind and takes the knight's necklace clean off. Victory. Total humiliating victory for the family that laughed at them yesterday. Frank's brother, stunned, agrees to leave him at the tower, and even offers free shipping through his family's distribution network. But the very next day, Frank finds himself locked in an old prison chamber for a brutal 30-day isolation training regime. Turns out our protagonist requested it himself, wanting Frank pushed to his absolute limit while there's still time. With Frank handled, our boy gets a new assignment from the tower's vice master: give a public lecture in front of the entire tower. On the day of the class, he issues a challenge. Anyone who can break his sound barrier spell in 10 minutes doesn't have to attend. Only one boy manages it, a proud young noble named Damien, thrilled with himself for solving the puzzle. Our protagonist rewards him by offering to teach him a spell, and Damien eagerly demonstrates his best wind blade. Our boy calmly crushes it with his bare hand and tells him it was never wind at all, and he was wasting mana the entire time. Damien is floored, because every word of that critique is dead accurate. He decides to stay for the class after all, exactly as our protagonist predicted. Weeks pass and word spreads that this lecturer is worth watching, drawing crowds far beyond beginners. Even the elder Maxim shows up out of curiosity, and gets so absorbed in the lesson he has a full magical awakening right there in his seat. And in that crowd sits a girl named Veronica, someone the old Oscar had once written pages of notes about. The next day, our protagonist follows her into a special training room, and gets curious about a mysterious record on the leaderboard. Someone anonymous just cleared the hardest level in under 10 minutes, the fastest time on record for the entire continent. Veronica has no idea it was him. Back in the halls, he learns that merchants have started boycotting White Tower potions out of fear of Blue Tower retaliation. Frustrating but manageable. There's always another angle. A few days later, Gandalf assigns our protagonist and Veronica to clear out a malfunctioning power plant together. Veronica clearly isn't thrilled about babysitting a low-level mage, but our boy quickly notices something's wrong. She's exhausted, pushing herself too hard, chasing a kind of wind magic that simply isn't suited for her. He tells her the truth. Her talent lies somewhere else entirely, in speed and precision, not raw power. At the power plant, they find the real problem: a giant cocoon feeding on the plant's mana, mid-transformation into something dangerous. They try to escape and call for backup, but the timing runs out before help can arrive. The creature hatches early, and it's hungry. Veronica gets injured trying to fight it, pierced by a fragment during a blocked attack, and can't move her legs. She tells our protagonist to run and save himself, but he can sense a lie. And this isn't one. She's terrified. Not lying. He tells her something simple: White Tower mages don't leave people behind. With barely a quarter of his mana left, he grabs the mercenary weapon he picked up earlier and fires point blank into the creature. The recoil dislocates his shoulder, but the shot lands clean. Falling from the ceiling with no mana to soften the impact, Veronica saves his life at the last second with an improvised air cushion. When he wakes up in the infirmary, both arms dislocated, Veronica is furious he scared her, and beats him black and blue out of pure relief. For his effort, he's rewarded the creature's magical core, and absorbing it pushes him all the way to level 3. Not far away, a royal investigator named Nebula shows up at the power plant, reading the leftover mana traces like a crime scene. He's stunned by how clean the fight looks, barely a trace left behind by whoever finished the creature off. When he learns it was a level 2 mage, he can't wrap his head around it, until he hears the name Oscar Crushin, and suddenly it clicks. This is the same kid behind the vaccine's miracle, and now apparently a monster hunter too. Our protagonist has bigger worries though. Wandering into the tower's crumbling library, once one of the greatest archives on the continent, he remembers assigning someone to copy every book here before he died, and that someone was Edna. He asks the librarian for anything on dragons from the last 20 years, and gets handed children's picture books. He learns Edna vanished after the war and hasn't been seen since, which doesn't sit right with him at all. Something is very wrong and he intends to find out exactly what. Back at the tower, the elders gather to celebrate finally climbing out of bankruptcy. But there's a deeper wound they can't fix with money. The tower used to know 64 advanced spells. Now they only remember 6. Meanwhile, a mage from an elite research department comes out of 3 months of seclusion, exhausted and frustrated. His name is Schwein, and he spent 7 years chasing a lost piece of magical theory with almost no progress. The elders suggest our protagonist as a research assistant, and Schwein immediately scoffs at the idea of a level 2 kid helping him, so they give him a test instead, one so complex a level 6 mage would struggle with it. Our protagonist finishes it in record time and every single answer is correct. Schwein stares at the last answer in disbelief, because that question wasn't just theory, it was the unfinished work of the great sage Oscar himself. It's called Ouroboros, a magic capable of generating an almost infinite source of wind energy. 23 years ago, it was meant to power a flying vessel called the Blue Sky Project, before the war forced them to abandon it. Now with modern magical engineering, that dream might finally be possible. Our protagonist, hearing his old research get a second chance, feels something he hasn't felt in a long time: genuine hope. He throws himself into the project alongside Schwein, working through blackouts and skipped meals to build a working prototype in secret. If word gets out before it's ready, the powerful Golden Tower could crush the entire project out of jealousy. But before he can get too deep into research, a new crisis interrupts everything. The power outages are getting worse, caused by more of those hungry creatures. Our protagonist volunteers to clean it out personally, but this time he's not alone in his troubles. Word comes down that our protagonist needs to travel to the city of Baran, and the tower panics when he leaves right as a mage killer is reported active in the region. Unaware of the danger, our boy strolls through the unfamiliar city, admiring how much it's grown. A tattooed stranger approaches claiming he's been sent to find him. Our protagonist assumes it's an enemy, and the two clash immediately, trading blows across the street. He accidentally throws the man like a sack of garbage, then knocks him out with a single devastating internal strike. Only after the fight ends does he learn the truth. This man wasn't an assassin at all. He was sent by Gandalf to protect him, and his name is Killian Rockwood, son of one of Oscar's oldest friends from his past life. Killian was in the middle of an urgent, high-paying job, and now his injuries have put that job at risk. Feeling guilty, our protagonist offers to take his place, and together they head to their next assignment. Their new client is a mermaid pop star named Marin, hiding her identity behind a wig and human disguise. She's being targeted by a jealous rival singer, and every mercenary in the city has already turned down the job out of fear. Our protagonist learns the stakes are personal for Marin. Her father is dying, and only performing for the Emperor can earn her the cure. He takes the job seriously, quietly eliminating 2 assassins scouting the hotel without even telling his client. the rival singer Ara, tracks him down personally, offering 10 times his current pay to switch sides. Our protagonist plays along just enough to gather information, secretly listening in on her entire assassination plan. On the night of the show, an assassin ambushes him in a hotel bathroom, poisoning him with a barrage of hidden needles. He collapses, paralyzed, completely helpless as the killer moves in for the final blow. But that wind barrier he cast earlier never actually dropped, and the killer's blade never even touches him. One shot ends it, and the assassin's partner meets the exact same fate moments later, right on schedule. A second, far more dangerous assassin appears, wielding poisoned shadow magic that melts guns on contact. Our protagonist survives by sealing his own body in a bubble of self-made oxygen, dodging every attack with mana-sharpened eyes. The fight spills outside, and he takes a brutal hit through a window, breaking his arm on impact. Cornered and weaponless, he's saved by his own client Marin, who remembers the signal they rehearsed, and triggers a wall of sound with the crowd's own cheering. The distraction is enough. One final shot ends the fight for good. 3 days later, battered but alive, our protagonist collects his payment and finally reveals his real name to Marin. She recognized him the whole time and admired him too much to ever back out of the deal. Elsewhere, the woman who hired those assassins gets terrible news. Both of her prized recruits are dead, and the man responsible is apparently Killian Rockwood. She stares at a photo of our protagonist and doesn't recognize the face at all, which only deepens the mystery. Her name is Kaya Rockwood, and we're about to learn exactly how she fits into all of this. Back with Killian, the two decide to stick together while they're both stuck in the same dangerous city. Killian is actually chasing his own target, a fugitive traitor from his tribe, and their paths are about to collide with something much bigger. Walking the streets that same day, our protagonist senses an extremely powerful presence watching him. A woman stares directly at him from across the street and disappears before he can react. It's Kaya, and she's intrigued by this level 3, nobody who somehow noticed her at all. Our protagonist has other business first. He heads to the Blood Tower, hoping to track down the missing dragon Edna. The service cost way more than he expects, and he learns something humiliating along the way. The old Oscar apparently abused this service so badly in his past life that the entire Blood Tower nearly went bankrupt because of him. He pays what he can and signs the contract, promising the rest later. Then he visits Killian, curious about that $500,000 coin job he mentioned earlier. It turns out to be connected to the death of Baran's former mayor, a man who was murdered after nearly wiping out the city's drug trade. The mayor's 10-year-old son Jake hires them personally, desperate to prove his father was assassinated. Our protagonist immediately senses something is wrong when Jake's own security team presents a fake magical contract. He exposes the deception on the spot, revealing that 2 of Jake's own men have already leaked information to the enemy. This is a war they didn't even know they were fighting, and it just got a lot more dangerous. Jake finally hands over the real evidence, a locked case sealed with 3 separate explosive traps. Our protagonist disarms it effortlessly, calling it a joke compared to what he lived through during the war. Inside they find the mayor's private diary, and what it reveals shatters Jake's entire world. His father's closest partner, a man named Mark, was secretly the executive of a massive drug cartel the whole time. The same man who comforted Jake at his father's grave was the one who ordered his father's murder. Jake breaks down completely, and our protagonist promises they'll make him pay no matter what it takes. They deduce the enemy will strike tonight, during the city's biggest public celebration, when everyone's distracted. Jake refuses to run and hide, choosing instead to stand and fight for his father's memory. Communication has already been cut off, but Killian gets creative, using an ancient crystal ball artifact to send an emergency code straight to the capital. Miles away, a bored government worker nearly misses the signal entirely, then scrambles to alert national security the moment he deficers it. Meanwhile, deep in the forest surrounding the mansion, an army of mercenaries begins their assault, over 150 strong. They don't know the ground beneath them is riddled with hidden magical traps, and chaos erupts within minutes. From high in the trees, our protagonist drops into the fight, cutting down enemy after enemy with brutal efficiency. Killian holds the mansion's roof alone, using thermal vision to snipe dozens of attackers from a distance most mages couldn't dream of. But something's wrong. The retreating mercenaries suddenly stop fleeing and start running straight back into the fight. They're not acting like themselves anymore. They're not even flinching from wounds that should have dropped them instantly. And then from the shadows a familiar voice speaks. It's been a long time. Kaya steps into the light, and our protagonist recognizes her instantly as a traitor from Killian's own tribe. She admits everything without a shred of guilt, confirming she's the reason their old chief went mad and died at his own warrior's hands. Our protagonist demands an explanation, and Kaya simply doesn't care to give him one. Enraged, he charges her directly, refusing to let Killian face this monster alone. Their fight rips the forest apart, explosions and shockwaves tearing through the trees with every clash. Kaya notices immediately that his fighting style has improved dramatically since whatever fight she remembers from before. Just as our protagonist lands a heavy hit, Kaya realizes her mind control ability over the mercenaries has been completely severed. That's when a massive beam of light crashes down from the sky, slamming directly into her. It's Killian sniping from an impossible distance, and Kaya can't believe a level 3 mage timed that shot so perfectly. She scans the entire forest for the shooter's position and finds absolutely nothing, which only makes her angrier. Determined to end this fast, she overwhelms our protagonist with a single devastating blow, sending him crashing to the ground. She turns her attention toward Killian's real position, moving to finish him personally. Killian buys himself time using a stealth technique that mimics the mana signature of the surrounding trees. It works for a while, until Kaya's instincts catch up with the trick, and she appears right in front of him with a mocking smile. She's genuinely curious now, asking why a low-level nobody from the White Tower is fighting like someone with real training. Our protagonist arrives just in time, badly wounded but standing, and the two of them agree they only need 10 seconds. Kaya calls it basic courtesy, watching them whisper their plan like children plotting behind her back. Our protagonist unleashes everything he has left, a massive surge of raw power that shocks even Kaya. He collapses from the strain, completely spent, but he bought exactly the time they needed. Killian traps her inside a dome that cuts off both air and mana completely, using knowledge only a former tower master should even know exists. Kaya realizes with horror that her sacred tattoo, her greatest weapon, has just been shut down entirely. She lunges at him with pure martial speed, and Killian counters using an ancient technique, passed down through generations of his tribe. A golden barrier blocks his decisive blow at the very last second, and Kaya reveals it was all an illusion, a trick to stall for time. With no mana left to fight back, Killian braces for the end, regretting he didn't take her seriously enough from the start. But then a massive black sword falls from the night sky, and a figure lands with enough force to shake the ground. His name is Walker, Superintendent of the Empire's national security, and a title known simply as the Emperor's Fuzz. He announces Kaya's arrest for murder and arson, backed by an entire squad of Imperial soldiers. Kaya, recognizing exactly how outmatched this changes things, calmly raises her hands and surrenders on the spot. She vanishes in a burst of wind before anyone can stop her, promising this isn't over. Walker turns his attention to the unconscious Killian, genuinely impressed the kid held on this long, against someone that dangerous. Back at the mansion, the truth finally comes out. Every criminal in Mark's cartel has been arrested, including Mark himself. His own daughter, Ara, the same woman who hired those assassins, is dragged away in handcuffs right alongside him. She screams at her father for ruining everything, and Mark can only watch in stunned silence as his daughter turns on him completely. Jake, finally safe, tells them his dream has changed entirely. He no longer wants to follow his father into politics. He wants to join national security instead, and spend his life stopping people like Mark from ever hurting another family. Killian wakes up days later to find our protagonist casually peeling an apple beside his bed, completely unbothered by the chaos they just survived. Walker stops by before leaving, and asks a question that sticks with him long after he walks out the door. Are all the mages from the White Tower like these two? He's used to mages who only care about profit, and these two broke that pattern completely. For the first time, Walker starts to understand why the older generation speaks about the White Tower with so much reverence. With Baran finally behind them, our protagonist and Killian head back toward the tower, carrying more secrets than either of them expected. Because Kaya Rockwood is still out there, and she's connected to something far bigger than one corrupt politician's murder. The mage hunter still stalks the northern territories, picking off lone mages one by one, and somewhere out there, a dragon named Edna is still hiding from the world, for reasons our protagonist hasn't uncovered yet. Back at the White Tower, life has changed almost beyond recognition from where this story started. No more bankruptcy, no more disrespect from rival towers, no more mages quietly slipping away for better offers elsewhere. The vaccine, the tonic, the airship research, all of it traces back to one stubborn kid nobody believed in. Gandalf finally has the funding to keep every promise the tower ever made to its people. Fidelina, once his harshest critic, now defends him without hesitation whenever anyone questions his methods. Frank finishes his brutal 30-day isolation training and emerges a completely different mage, calm, controlled, and genuinely powerful. Veronica keeps training relentlessly, but now with a technique that actually fits who she is, instead of chasing someone else's strength. Schwein's research on the flying vessel accelerates by the week, edging closer to something that could change the entire continent. And through it all, our protagonist keeps one eye on the horizon, because something big is coming. The Imperial family has already announced it. This year's White Night Festival is approaching fast. It's the one event where every major tower gathers to show off their power, their pride, and sometimes settle old grudges. The Black Tower wants in, hungry to claim a spot among the top 4 towers by any means necessary. That makes the White Tower a target. Exactly the kind of target Gandalf feared when he first pulled our protagonist aside about giving that lecture. Our protagonist isn't worried, if anything he's excited. In his past life, he built an entire tower from nothing and held the line against monsters that could level cities. A jealous rival tower throwing a tantrum over recognition is nothing compared to that. Still, there are threads left dangling that even he can't ignore. Kaya Rockwood is connected to something called the Tattooers, a group Killian had never even heard of before that fight. And that scent, the same faint mint fragrance the gang boss mentioned, all the way back at the start, keeps surfacing in the strangest places. Whoever poisoned this boy's body in the first place is still out there. And they're clearly connected to people with real power. Our protagonist hasn't forgotten that promise he made to himself in the very beginning. Find out who wanted this kid dead and make them regret it. Every victory since then, the vaccine, the Tonic Empire, saving Frank, protecting Marin, taking down Mark's cartel, all of it serves that same purpose. Rebuild the tower's strength, and rebuild it fast, because whoever is hunting this boy clearly isn't finished yet. Back in the capital, whispers spread about the mysterious level 2 mage who keeps solving problems way above his rank. Rival towers start paying closer attention, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. The Blue Tower, still smarting from their humiliating loss over the vaccine, quietly begins investigating exactly who this kid really is. They find nothing that makes sense. A level 2 mage shouldn't be able to do any of what he's already done. Meanwhile, our protagonist returns to Schwein's lab, eager to push the airship project even further before the festival arrives. Every late night spent testing equations, every blackout they've weathered together, it's all building towards something historic. If they can reveal a working prototype during the White Night Festival, it won't just save the tower's reputation. It'll announce to the entire continent that the White Tower is back, and back in a way nobody can ignore. Schwein warns him again about the risk. If the Golden Tower discovers this before they're ready, they'll shut it down instantly. Our protagonist has heard that warning before, and his answer hasn't changed. If he lets fear control his choices, he'll never accomplish anything worth remembering. That mindset alone tells you everything about who this boy really became in his second chance at life. Not a reckless hero chasing glory, but a strategist who knows exactly what risk is worth taking. Back at the tower's training grounds, Frank practices his new control every single morning, refusing to waste a single day of his second chance either. Veronica pushes her speed and precision harder than ever, determined to prove her instructor right about where her true strength lies. Even Damien, the noble boy who once mocked the idea of attending a lecture, now shows up early to every single class. The White Tower that was once written off as a relic of the past is quietly becoming something dangerous again. And at the center of it all is a boy who technically shouldn't even exist, wearing a body that wasn't supposed to survive. He was given a second life, a chance most people never get, and he refuses to waste a single second of it, because somewhere out there, someone poisoned an innocent kid and left him for dead, thinking nobody would ever find out. They had no idea what they were actually waking up. This isn't a story about a hero seeking revenge for glory or fame. It's about a man who lost everything once, and refuses to let that happen again. Every business deal, every duel, every late night in that lab is one more brick in a wall he's building around the people he's chosen to protect. Gandalf, who never gave up on him even when the tower had nothing left to give. Frank, who found the courage to become someone worth being proud of. Veronica, who trusted a stranger's advice enough to finally stop fighting herself. Killian, a friend who nearly died protecting people he'd only just met. Marin, who risked her own life for a chance to save her father. Jake, a 10-year-old boy who refused to run even when everything told him to. Every single one of them believed in this so-called nobody, before they even understood who he really was. And that trust is exactly what fuels him now, heading into whatever the White Night Festival is about to throw at him. Because somewhere out there, Kaya Rockwood is still moving pieces on a board nobody else can see yet. The mint-scented client who paid to have him killed is still walking around free. And Edna, the dragon who witnessed his first death, is still missing without explanation. Every one of these threads is pulling tighter, and they're all converging on the same event, the same night, the same tower. Our protagonist knows it too. He can feel it in the air every time he walks those tower halls. Something is coming, and when it arrives, it won't just test his magic. It'll test everything he rebuilt from nothing since the day he woke up in a stranger's body. But if there's one thing this story has proven again and again, it's that betting against this kid's always a losing move. He turned a bankrupt tower into an empire. He turned a broken boy into a hero. He turned enemies into cautionary tales. Whatever walks through the White Tower's doors looking for a fight is about to learn exactly why they called him the great sage in his first life. Because he didn't just come back to relive his past, he came back to finish it on his own terms, for the people who actually deserve his loyalty this time around. And as the White Night Festival draws closer, every rival tower, every hidden enemy, every shadow from his past starts closing in at once. The Black Tower wants to prove its dominance. The Blue Tower wants revenge for their humiliation. Kaya Rockwood wants whatever twisted plan she's still chasing. And somewhere in the shadows, the person who poisoned an innocent boy is still watching, still waiting. They're all about to find out the same hard truth. This so-called level 2 nobody has already survived one apocalypse. He is not afraid of a second one. In the training halls, our protagonist begins preparing his mages for whatever the festival throws at them. Drilling formations most of them have never even heard of. He pulls Frank aside personally, refining his control even further, insisting that raw power without discipline is worthless on a stage like this. Veronica gets paired with 2 other students, forced to learn how her speed fits into a team, instead of fighting solo like she always has. Even Damien, still a little too proud for his own good, finds himself humbled again and again in every sparring match. Our protagonist watches all of it with a strange kind of pride, remembering what it felt like teaching a different generation of students long ago. Back in the lab, Schwein finally hits a breakthrough that changes everything about the airship's timeline. The battery core our protagonist helped design is stable enough for an actual test flight, months ahead of schedule. They keep the news locked down tight, terrified of what happens if the Golden Tower catches wind of it too soon. Meanwhile, whispers about Kaya Rockwood start reaching the capital, connecting her name to disappearances all across the empire. Investigators like Nebula start quietly building a file, one that keeps circling back to the same city, the same tower, the same mysterious level 2 mage. Our protagonist has no idea just how many powerful people have started paying attention to him, and honestly at this point, he wouldn't slow down even if he did. Because every step forward isn't just for him anymore. It's for every single person who chose to believe in him, when believing cost them something real. The White Night Festival isn't just a competition to him. It's a promise he intends to keep, to a tower that gave a lost boy a second chance at life, and to a body that deserved so much better than what someone tried to do to it. Whatever comes through those doors on festival night, he's more than ready. Because this time he's not fighting alone. He's got Gandalf's faith, Frank's loyalty, Veronica's trust, Killian's friendship, and an entire tower standing behind him. And that more than any spell or sword is exactly what makes him unstoppable. Let's rewind for a second, because there's one detail worth sitting with before we push forward. Every single fight in this story starts the exact same way, with someone underestimating this boy completely. The gang boss thought he was an easy kill. The Blue Tower thought he was a joke. Even Kaya thought he was barely worth her attention. Every single one of them learned the same lesson the hard way. Power in this world isn't just about your level number. It's about experience, and this kid has an entire lifetime of experience nobody else in this story can even comprehend. He fought in a war that ended civilizations. He trained an army that saved humanity. He built a tower from absolutely nothing. And now he's doing it all over again, except this time, he's not doing it out of duty. He's doing it because he actually gets to choose the people around him, this time. That's the real twist buried underneath every business deal and every duel in this story. This isn't just a revenge plot or a power fantasy about beating up bad guys. It's a story about a man getting a second chance to live selfishly, and discovering that selfishness looks a lot like loyalty when you actually love the people around you. He protects Frank because Frank matters to him, not because it's his duty as a mentor. He saves Veronica because he refuses to lose someone else he cares about, not because the tower assigned him to. He rebuilds the White Tower because it's his home, not because some ancient promise demands it. Every choice in this story circles back to that one dying wish he made in his first life. Live selfishly, live for the people who actually matter. And somehow, living selfishly turned him into the most selfless hero this tower has seen in 20 years. Funny how that works out sometimes. Back to the present, tensions keep rising as the festival gets closer, and our protagonist finally gets word from the Blood Tower. Their search for Edna has turned up something. Though it's not the answer he was hoping for. The trail is faint, scattered, almost deliberately hidden, as if someone doesn't want her found at all. That thought sits heavy with him, because Edna wasn't the type to hide from anything, not even death itself. Something happened to her after the war, something bad enough to make a dragon disappear completely. Our protagonist adds her name to the growing list of mysteries he refuses to let go unsolved. Kaya Rockwood, the mint-scented client, and now a missing dragon who once fought by his side. Every one of these threads feels connected, even if he can't quite see the shape of it yet. But he's patient. He's always been patient. That's how you survive a war that lasted longer than most people's entire lives. For now, his focus stays locked on the festival, because that's where all these shadows seem to be gathering. The imperial family finally releases the full details, and the entire tower gathers to hear them. Every tower will showcase their strongest achievements, their most talented mages, in front of the emperor himself. For the White Tower, that means the airship prototype, if Schwein's team can finish it in time. It means Frank, Veronica, and Damien, showing the world exactly what real training looks like. And it means our protagonist, stepping fully into the spotlight for the first time since he woke up in this body. No more hiding behind vaccines and business deals. This time, the world gets to see exactly what he can do. Gandalf pulls him aside one evening, quietly grateful for everything this boy rebuilt from nothing. He tells him something simple, something that sticks with our protagonist long after the conversation ends. The tower doesn't need him to be the great sage from 20 years ago. It just needs him to keep being exactly who he's already chosen to become. And for a man who spent his entire first life carrying the weight of an entire war on his shoulders, that's the kindest thing anyone said to him in either lifetime. The night before the festival, our protagonist stands alone on the tower's highest floor, the same floor from his recurring dream. The garden is empty now, overgrown, nothing like the peaceful place he remembers teaching 3 children about wind and balance. But standing there, he realizes something important. This tower isn't the same place he lost 20 years ago, and it was never going to be. It's something new, built by new hands, carrying new stories, even if the foundation is still built on everything he sacrificed the first time around. And honestly, he wouldn't want it any other way, because the students he's training now aren't ghosts of the past. They're their own people, choosing their own futures, just like he always wanted for Lloyd, Sasha, and Gileath back when this all began. Tomorrow, the White Tower steps onto the biggest stage in the Empire, and whatever enemies are watching from the shadows will finally have to show themselves. Kaya, the mint-scented stranger, whoever wants this tower to fail, they're all going to be there, one way or another. And our protagonist, for the first time since he opened his eyes in a stranger's body, feels something close to peace, not because the danger is gone, but because he's finally ready for whatever comes next. The morning of the festival arrives, and the entire capital buzzes with excitement. Most cities only see once in a generation. Every major tower marches in with their best mages on full display, banners flying, crowds pushing against the barricades just to catch a glimpse. The Golden Tower shows off, blistering acceleration magic, drawing gasps from the crowd with every impossible feat of speed. The Red Tower answers with a wall of controlled fire, disciplined and terrifying, exactly what you'd expect from the Empire's military powerhouse. The Blue Tower, still smarting from their public humiliation, puts on a flashy water display, desperate to remind everyone they still matter. And then it's the White Tower's turn to step onto that stage. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Isn't that the tower that nearly went bankrupt just months ago? Frank steps out first, calm and composed in a way nobody who knew him a few months ago would recognize. He demonstrates full-body wind conversion with total control. No panic, no spiraling mana, just precision. The crowd goes quiet, genuinely stunned by the level of mastery on display from someone so young. Veronica follows, blending speed and precision into a display that looks less like combat magic and more like a dance. Damien rounds it out, showing off the exact technique our protagonist once crushed with his bare hands. Except how it's flawless. Then Gandalf steps forward and announces the tower has one final surprise for the Emperor. A massive curtain drops, revealing something the crowd has never seen before in their entire lives. A vessel, built entirely from magical engineering, humming with power drawn straight from Ouroboros itself. Schwinn stands beside it, practically vibrating with excitement after 7 years of failure finally paying off in front of the entire Empire. The airship lifts off the ground. Just a few feet. Just long enough to prove it's real. And the crowd absolutely loses their minds. The Emperor himself rises from his seat visibly stunned, watching humanity's dream of conquering the sky finally take its first real step. This is the moment. This is everything our protagonist rebuilt this tower for. Not the money. Not the vaccines, not even the vengeance he swore to chase since day one. This, proof that the White Tower still has something no other tower can offer, vision, and the courage to chase it. But even in the middle of triumph, our protagonist stays alert. Because he can feel it. That same dangerous presence from the forest fight. Kai is here. Somewhere in this crowd watching everything unfold. She doesn't attack, not yet. She just watches, calculating, exactly like she did during their first encounter. Our protagonist locks eyes with her from across the massive crowd, and for a brief second, neither of them looks away. She offers the smallest nod, almost respectful, before disappearing into the sea of spectators. It's not peace, it's not surrender either. It's something closer to acknowledgement, one dangerous person recognizing another. Whatever she's planning, it's not happening today, and that's enough for now. The festival continues late into the night, celebrations spilling into every street of the capital. For the first time in 20 years, people are talking about the White Tower with genuine admiration instead of pity. Gandalf can barely hold back tears watching the crowd cheer for a tower he thought was dying just months earlier. Fidelina, the same woman who once wanted our protagonist locked in isolation for wasting tower funds, stands beside him applauding louder than anyone. Frank finds his family in the crowd, and for the first time his brother looks at him with something that isn't disappointment. It's pride, real pride, and Frank has never felt anything like it in his entire life. Veronica watches the celebration with quiet satisfaction, finally proving to herself that her own strength was always enough. Killian shows up late, still recovering from his injuries, grinning ear to ear at the sight of everything his friend accomplished. Our protagonist stands at the center of it all, and for one night, allows himself to actually enjoy the victory instead of already planning the next move. But even celebrations end, and by the next morning reality sets back in fast. A messenger arrives from the capital carrying urgent news, the kind that can't wait for celebrations to fully wind down. Tower Master Sasha is finally returning early, cutting her business trip short after hearing everything that's happened while she was away. Our protagonist feels something complicated stirring in his chest at the news. Sasha, his former 5-year-old student, is now a grown woman leading the very tower he once built from nothing. He spent this entire second life avoiding a direct meeting with her, terrified of what seeing her again might actually feel like. But he can't avoid it forever, not after everything the tower just accomplished under her banner. Meanwhile, deep in the capital's investigation offices, Nebula finally compiles his full report on the mysterious Level 2 mage everyone keeps talking about. The pattern is undeniable at this point. Every major event in the past few months traces back to the same person. The vaccine, the moth attack, the Baran assassinations, even the sudden appearance of Kaya Rockwood at a public festival. Nebula requests official clearance to open a formal investigation, and this time, his superiors don't hesitate to approve it. Back at the tower, our protagonist receives word that Sasha wants to meet him personally alone. Before addressing the rest of the tower, he walks into that meeting room more nervous than he's been in either lifetime, and that includes facing down demon armies. Sasha enters, and for a moment neither of them says a single word. She studies his face carefully, searching for something she can't quite explain even to herself. Finally, she asks him a question that catches him completely off guard. Has anyone ever told you that you remind them of someone? Our protagonist feels his chest tighten, unsure how much of the truth he's actually ready to share with her. He deflects with a joke and Sasha lets it go, though the look in her eyes says she's not entirely convinced. She thanks him instead, sincerely, for everything he's done to rebuild the tower she nearly lost hope in saving. He tells her the truth, that he didn't do it alone, that an entire tower full of loyal people made this possible. Sasha smiles at that answer, and for a brief second, our protagonist sees a flicker of the little girl he once taught about balance and harmony. The moment passes, and business takes over again, because a tower this size never stops needing decisions made. She officially promotes him, cutting through years of bureaucratic tradition, to recognize contributions that clearly speak for themselves. It's not the title our protagonist cares about, it's the trust behind it, earned the hard way, exactly like he wanted this time around. Outside the meeting room, Frank waits anxiously, desperate to know how it went. Our protagonist just smiles and tells him the tower's future has never looked brighter. And for once, that's not an exaggeration or a clever piece of marketing, it's simply the truth. Weeks pass, and the White Tower settles into a rhythm nobody thought possible just months earlier. Applications from talented young mages start flooding in, drawn by stories of the tower's incredible turnaround. Gandalf finally gets to rebuild the departments he'd been forced to abandon for lack of funding. The potion room expands, the research wing grows, even the old training facilities get the renovation they desperately needed. And through it all, our protagonist keeps working, refusing to let a single victory make him complacent, because he knows better than anyone how quickly everything can fall apart. He lived through that lesson once already, and he has no intention of learning it the hard way a second time. Kaya Rockwood is still out there, the mint-scented client is still hiding somewhere with unfinished business, and a missing dragon named Edna still holds answers our protagonist desperately needs. But for now, in this rare quiet moment, he allows himself something he never got in his first life. Time. Time to watch his students grow, time to build real friendships instead of wartime alliances, time to actually live. Late one evening, sitting on the same rooftop where he once dreamed of teaching 3 young children, our protagonist looks out over a city he helped rebuild. The lights below flicker in patterns he still hasn't fully gotten used to, powered by Mage that didn't even exist in his first lifetime. And yet somehow it feels like home, not because everything is exactly like it used to be, but because he finally gets to choose what home looks like this time. Frank finds him up there, as he often's now, and sits down without needing an invitation. They don't talk about business or magic theory, or the countless threats still circling the tower. They just sit together, watching the city lights, exactly like two friends should. Veronica joins them a while later, followed by Killian, who's finally recovered enough to travel again. For one evening, the weight of rebuilding an entire tower feels lighter, shared between people who genuinely care about each other. Our protagonist looks around at the small group gathered on that rooftop, and thinks about everything he lost in his first life. An entire army of loyal fighters, sacrificed piece by piece until nothing was left but him and a dying dragon. This time feels different. This time, he's building something meant to last. Brick by brick, friend by friend. Somewhere out there, Kaya Rockwood is still planning her next move. Somewhere out there, the person who poisoned this boy's body is still hiding behind that faint scent of mint. Somewhere out there, a dragon named Edna is waiting to be found. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, our protagonist finally understands what his dying wish in his first life truly meant. Live selfishly, live for the people who actually matter. Looking around at the friends surrounding him, he realizes he's already doing exactly that. And for a man who once carried the weight of an entire war on his shoulders alone, that realization means everything. The White Tower isn't just standing again, it's thriving, growing stronger every single day under leadership that actually cares about its people. Sasha rules with the wisdom of someone who learned from the best, even if she doesn't fully understand yet exactly who taught her. Frank has become the mage he always dreamed of being, proving that talent was never his problem, just the chance to prove it. Veronica finally trusts her own instincts, no longer chasing someone else's version of strength. Killian has a family again. Not by blood, but by choice, exactly the kind of family a forest warrior values most. And Jake, the boy who lost his father to a corrupt cartel, is already training for a future dedicated to protecting people just like his father tried to. Every single life our protagonist touched since waking up in this body has changed for the better. And that, more than any battle won or empire rebuilt, is the real legacy of a man who once thought his story ended alone on a battlefield. It didn't end there. It was only just beginning. Because a second chance means nothing if you don't use it to build something worth protecting. And this so-called nobody, this bastard mage stuck at level 1, built exactly that. Piece by piece, person by person. The threats are still out there, the mysteries are still unsolved. The next chapter of this story is far from finished, but for the first time in either of his lives, our protagonist isn't facing any of it alone. He has a tower behind him, he has friends, he has a second chance he refuses to waste. And whatever comes next, Kaya, the mint-scented stranger, or whatever shadow still lurks in his past, he'll face it exactly the same way he's faced everything else. Head-on, unafraid, and surrounded by the people who actually matter, because that was always the whole point of this second life in the first place. Let's take a step back and look at just how far this story has come. A boy who woke up broke, poisoned, and abandoned in a body nobody believed in. A tower that was one bad season away from closing its doors forever. A world that had completely forgotten the name Oscar Crushin. Now look at what's left standing. A tower overflowing with talent, funded beyond anyone's wildest expectations, respected across the entire empire. An airship prototype that just proved humanity can finally touch the sky. A found family built from strangers who became genuine friends, one impossible situation at a time. Every single villain who underestimated this kid learned the same lesson the hard way. The gang boss who tried to erase him from existence. The Blue Tower who mocked his bankrupt institution. The corrupt politician who thought money could buy silence forever. Every single one of them is gone now, defeated by a level 2 mage they never took seriously enough. And the one still circling in the shadows, Kaya Rockwood, the mysterious poisoner, whoever else is still watching from a distance. They should probably start taking him seriously too, because this isn't a story about a broken boy getting lucky. It's a story about a legend given one more chance, and choosing, deliberately, to become something even greater the second time around, not through power alone, through loyalty, through kindness, through the simple decision to actually care about the people fighting beside him. That's the twist nobody saw coming when this story opened with a dying man on a battlefield 20 years ago. The great sage Oscar didn't come back to relive his old glory. He came back to build something his first life never gave him time to build. A real home, filled with real people who chose him back. Every vaccine sold, every duel won, every enemy defeated. All of it was just the vehicle. The real story was always about connection, about a man learning that living selfishly and living for others were never actually opposites at all. Frank found his courage because someone finally believed he had it. Veronica found her strength because someone showed her it looked different than she expected. Killian found a purpose beyond just following orders, because someone treated him like family instead of a weapon. Jake found justice for his father, because someone refused to let a 10-year-old fight that battle completely alone. And our protagonist, the man who died completely isolated on a battlefield decades ago, finally found something he never had in his first life. People who chose to stand beside him, not out of duty, but because they genuinely wanted to. That's not just a power fantasy, that's the whole heart of this entire story. A second chance isn't about fixing your mistakes. It's about finally understanding what actually mattered the whole time. And this boy, reborn 20 years into a future he never expected to see, finally figured that out. The mysteries are still out there, waiting patiently in the shadows for their moment to strike. Kaya Rockwood, connected to a shadowy group nobody fully understands yet. A missing dragon, hiding for reasons that clearly aren't good ones. A poisoner still walking free, wearing a scent of mint that our protagonist will never forget. Every single one of those threads is still waiting to be pulled, and when they are, this story is going to explode to extent even bigger. But that's a chapter for another day. Today the White Tower stands tall, funded, respected, and stronger than it's been in 20 years. Today a boy who was left for dead has built something no assassin, no rival tower, and no corrupt politician could ever tear down again. Today the great sage Oscar finally has exactly what he wished for on that battlefield all those years ago. A life worth living selfishly, surrounded by people worth fighting for. And honestly, watching him get there was one of the most satisfying rides this genre has offered in a long time. From a level 1 bastard mage nobody respected, to the man rebuilding an empire from the ground up. Every single obstacle in his path underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. A Ninth Circle mage, a war hero. A teacher who never stopped caring about the people he trained, even 20 years and an entirely new body later. This isn't just a comeback story. It's a story about what happens when someone finally gets the chance to do everything right the second time around. And if the first act of this journey was this explosive, imagine what happens when Kaya Rockwood finally makes her real move. Imagine what happens when Edna is finally found, and the truth about her disappearance comes to light. Imagine what happens when the person behind that mint-scented poison finally shows their face. Because if this story has taught us anything so far, it's that betting against this man is always a losing move. He turned poison into purpose. He turned bankruptcy into an empire. He turned strangers into family. And he did it all while carrying the weight of an entire lost war on his shoulders, quietly, without ever asking for credit. That's not just power, that's character. And character is exactly what separates a forgettable power fantasy from a story people actually remember. This one without question belongs in that second category. So here's where we leave our protagonist for now, standing on a rooftop, surrounded by the family he chose for himself. A tower rebuilt from nothing. A city that respects his name again, a future finally worth living for. The shadows are still out there, patient, waiting for their moment, but so is he, patient, prepared, and completely unafraid of whatever comes next. Because a man who already survived the end of the world once isn't losing sleep over what's coming next. He's already planning 3 steps ahead exactly like he always has. And whoever underestimates him next is about to learn the exact same lesson everyone before them learned the hard way. This so-called nobody was never a nobody at all. He was always the great sage Oscar, biding his time, rebuilding his strength, waiting for the perfect moment to remind the world exactly who he is. And judging by everything he's already accomplished in just a few short months, that moment is coming faster than anyone expects. The White Tower's flag flies high again over the city skyline, a symbol of everything one determined kid can accomplish when given a real second chance. Not because fate handed it to him easily, but because he refused to let a poisoned body, a broken reputation, or a world that forgot his name stop him from rebuilding everything from scratch. That's the story underneath all the vaccines, duels, and dramatic rescues. A man proving, again and again, that a second chance means nothing without the will to actually use it. And he used every second of his. From a hospital bed to a festival stage in front of the emperor himself. That's a journey worth remembering. From poisoned and forgotten to respected across the entire continent, that's a comeback worth celebrating. From a broken bastard mage to the beating heart of an entire tower's revival, that's the kind of transformation this genre lives for, and it's only the beginning of what this man is capable of. Somewhere out there, Kaya Rockwood is already planning her next move. Somewhere out there, the truth about Edna's disappearance is waiting to be uncovered. Somewhere out there, the person who poisoned him in the first place is still hiding, still believing they got away with it. They're wrong. Because a man who rebuilt an entire tower from nothing isn't going to let a single loose thread stay unsolved forever. He's coming for every single one of them, in his own time, on his own terms. And when he does, it won't just be revenge, it'll be justice. Delivered by the one man in this entire world who actually has the strength, the will, and the loyal friends to back it up. So if you've made it this far in the recap, you already know exactly why this story hits as hard as it does. It's not just about magic power levels or dramatic duels. It's about a man given the rarest gift imaginable, a second chance, and choosing to use it for something bigger than himself. He rebuilt a tower, he rebuilt a family, he rebuilt a legacy that was almost erased completely. And through every single obstacle, every enemy, every impossible situation, he never once forgot the promise he made on that battlefield 20 years ago. Live selfishly, live for the people who actually matter. Looking at everything he's built since waking up in this world, it's safe to say he's kept that promise completely. The tower stands, the friends remain, the future looks brighter than it has in decades. And somewhere out there, still hidden in the shadows, are the answers this man has been chasing since the moment he opened his eyes in a stranger's body. Kaya Rockwood, the missing dragon, the poison that should have ended his story before it even began. Every one of those threads is still waiting, patiently, for the day this man decides it's finally time to pull them. And when that day comes, you can bet it's going to be worth every single minute we spent watching him get there, because that's the real magic of this story. Not the spells, not the duels, not even the airships soaring over the capital. It's watching a man who lost everything once, refused to let that happen ever again. A tower refound, a promise kept. That's the story of the great sage Oscar, reborn, rebuilt, and finally, truly alive. Not because he came back from the dead, but because for the first time in either of his lives, he actually has something worth living for. And that, more than any power or title, is the greatest victory this story has ever given him.